I'm delighted to welcome back the former host of this program back to Studio 2, this time on the other side of the mic. Al Letson, good morning.
Hey, hey, hey. Good morning.
Hey, it's great to have you here, Al. Thanks for coming in. Um, so you are rolling out a new podcast. Just going to say, like, in your spare time.
Yeah, in my spare time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a busy guy. You've got a lot going on. I mean, you're not just the Reveal host. You're a writer in Hollywood. You are working on TV shows. You're
Mhm.
working on a comic. Can you just catch me up a little bit on where you are creatively right now?
If I do that, I'm going to be exhausted. I'm just saying it out loud. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, I host Reveal, which is on over 500 NPR stations across the country,
Including here in Jacksonville.
including here in Jacksonville. Thankfully, here in Jacksonville. And so of course that's a podcast reaching. I think we're doing like about 1 million listeners. So I'm doing that. Then I'm writing a comic book for DC Comics, Mr. Terrific. Mr. Terrific #1 will come out I think May 28th. It worked out that we're talking today because DC just announced it yesterday. So
Oh, sweet.
yeah.
Mr. Terrific. So when you say you're writing a comic, are you going to be doing like more than one edition of this character?
Yeah, so he is like it's going to be a 6 issue miniseries. And a thing that happens in comics, specifically with DC Comics, is they do this idea of called year one. And so like the most famous example is they did Batman year one, and it was like really like going back and looking at how Batman became Batman. It's not really an origin story, but it's like his first year as a rookie going out, doing this stuff. So, so I am working on it's a mini series, and we're doing 6 issues. Yeah, and it starts in May, and I've been working on it for a bit. Uh, Kind of the way it all happened is that there's a new Superman movie coming out in I think June or July, and Mr. Terrific is one of the characters in it.
Oh, wow.
So I pitched DC almost like 2 years ago to do a mini series on Mr. Terrific, and they were very interested. And then the images from the movie came out with Mr. Terrific, and then they thought, okay, we got to do this. So yeah, so I'm doing that.
And we
Um,
should say, I mean,
yeah.
you're a
Go ahead.
kind
No,
of
go
a
ahead.
comic book nerd,
Oh my
right?
God, huge comic book nerd.
What's different about writing for, I mean, you've written poems, you've written plays, you've
Hmm.
written for TV.
It is so different because like telling a story sequentially means that like you're thinking about panel to panel and how characters move and how they talk, whereas like with a movie it's kind of, or a TV show, it's like straight through, right? Like you don't have to think about like, okay, so he's here and then he's here and how do I explain getting over there. In a script you just write, okay, they go over there. So it's really it's a different muscle, and it feels a lot like a puzzle. Like when I'm putting together a comic book, it's really like trying to make all the pieces work. I love it though. I love all of. I love writing. So I love when I'm like writing a script. I love when when I'm writing a TV script. I love it. It's a different type of muscle, uh,
Do you
opposed to
work,
like comic books.
are you working with an artist on this?
Hmm.
And how do you, how do you storyboard so you know what you're writing and they know what they're drawing?
Yeah, so like we pitch out what the whole idea is of the issue, and then me and the artist kind of talk through like big moments. Before I get started, I always love to ask an artist, "What do you love to draw? Like, what makes you happy?" And so I'm always thinking about that when I'm thinking about how I'm telling the story. And I think like the principles of storytelling translate from TV, film to comic books as well, as in like with a TV show, you're always writing for the break. You're always writing for that place where like either there's a commercial or the story is about to end. So you're trying to ramp up the action or ramp up the tension so that when the break comes, people come back to watch it, right?
Mm.
So with a comic book, you're writing for the end, and that's the break. So you want to have a cliffhanger at the end of every book, and so that's what I've been. So that's kind of like the guiding light that I use when I'm putting these together. And then I give them a script, and then we talk about it. He tells me what he sees. I try with a comic book script. I try not to be too much like telling him exactly what needs to be in the frame or in the panel. I kind of just say like this needs to happen, and this is what the characters are saying, and then he goes and I let he does his art. Like I think it's really important in a comic book that like as a writer I have my art, and as an artist he has his art, and we respect each other and kind of work together. So the two artists that I'm working with on Mr. Terrific have been great. We've had a blast, and once this thing is done, they're in one of them is in Canada and one of them is in Peru, and we're already planning to meet at a Comic Con and just and catch up. So
Wow.
it's been great. It's been great.
So that's one of your projects.
Yes, that's one that just got announced. I have been developing a TV show with a major network and some really big producers, and we're moving that forward. I can't say a whole bunch about it, but we're moving that forward, and
Are you
that's
allowed
pretty
to
good.
say, like, kind of what the vibe is or the genre? Is it like a,
No, I mean, yeah, no, I'd like to keep it a secret until it's announced. I'll just say that it's a drama, and I'll say that I am working with some people who have some really impressive credits, things that everybody has seen before. Things, a show that, at one point was a real cultural phenomenon. And
and so
so
it's greenlit, but it's not announced?
it's the writers' room is greenlit. So like in TV, like a lot of times, especially now, it's like you have these different phases of it. And so I was in a development stage when I was, thinking of the idea and writing the pilot script. And then once the pilot script was done, they liked it and they move you into a writer's room. And so at the end of the writer's room, they'll make a decision about whether they're going to create the show or not. So we're in that middle phase, the writers' room, which is big deal.
And when you, uh, assuming that gets to fruition, like, what is your title on that production? What is your role?
So in that role, I am the showrunner.
Wow.
I'm a co-showrunner. So I haven't run a show before. I've been on 6 different TV shows as a writer. Um,
Explain. I mean, I
sure.
know the term, and I know that it's a hugely important
hmm
piece of any production, but I'm not sure I really it's kind of everything, right?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest way to think of a showrunner is a CEO of. If you think of like the series or the show as a business, the CEO, the showrunner is the CEO. The showrunner does everything from hiring the people who work on set to hiring the actors to being the head writer to communicating with the network. All of that stuff. It's a huge job. And because I've never done it before, I hired or the network hired a co-showrunner, so we'll be doing it together.
Mhm.
And the co-showrunner has done it before, so I'll be learning a lot from him. And yeah, it's exciting. And this project is something I've been working on for almost because TV is slow. Like I pitched them. Let's see, I pitched them in 22 in January of 22. And so we've just been going since 22 to right now. And I can't tell you how many times I've done this process before and it never got this far, for one reason or another. So yeah, like no, I'm super excited. The producers I'm working with are pretty excellent. And yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's a big job. It's a big job. I mean, it's like being your typical TV show. Uh, Probably is running about your average TV show is probably running about 8 million an episode, but you can also there's a lot of them that are doing five as well, especially now. Like after the strike, things have gotten a lot cheaper. So if you're doing 8 episodes, that's a lot of money that you're entrusted with that you got to figure out. So yeah, it's a big deal. But
That's huge, and so is that all that you're working on right now?
no,
Okay. Please continue.
no. So the uh, comic book, and the TV show, and then Reveal, and this new podcast, which is going to drop on Wednesdays. It's called More to the Story, and it's me doing exactly what you're doing right now, like a one-on-one interview show with a guest,
Yeah,
which I'm excited for. It's just it's just a lot.
yeah.
But I'm excited for it.
And it's called More to the Story. That's always been your tagline
Yep.
on Reveal. That's kind of how you sign off
Yep.
when you do the episodes. What does that phrase just kind of mean to you personally? Why is that something that you started saying in the first place?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, I started saying it in the first place, like, I think I did it on the second episode of Reveal 10 years ago, and, we just needed a tagline, it was what came out. But over the years, it has meant to me that I think, that, Reveal is a very different beast than most news programs in the sense that, we're not necessarily tied to the news of right now. We're more tied to the idea of doing these deep investigations and giving you a better understanding of the world. I like to think that like the work that Reveal does is really about giving context to the news that you hear every day. I think part of the problem with news is that we hear a story, but we don't get the context in which we hear that story. So we don't quite understand it. And I think that like that's what our job is to do is to come in and kind of fill in those blanks. And so there's always more to the story. And so what we're doing with this podcast, with this new Wednesday drop, is really like telling the story of the world that we live in today, but kind of going deeper and kind of looking behind the scenes, i.e., like one of the interviews I did for this was with Bob Shank, who was kind of the architect, I would say, of a lot of the Christian nationalist movements that we see happening now, and that was great.
I actually want to listen to a little bit of that interview because it is um, pretty dramatic. You know, he has sort of turned against Trump and Christian conservatism, even though that was his wheelhouse for so long.
Yeah.
Let's listen to a little bit of what he had to say.
This is the first time, Al, I'm going to say this in a public forum. I don't think you can be a Christian and embrace Donald Trump because I see him as the antithesis of everything Jesus stood for, everything he modeled, and in my theology, everything he died for.
So that's a pretty dramatic reveal there
Yeah.
for somebody. He even says it's nothing he's ever said publicly. That must have kind of surprised you.
Yeah, it was that interview was intense in all the right ways. It was a 2 hour interview, like and as an interviewer, like going on for 2 hours that's a long
You're pretty tired, yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a 2 hour interview and we just talked about everything. I think my style of interviewing people is that I really love to dive deep. And so what I tend to do is as they're giving a little bit of themselves, I give a little bit of myself. I listen, and I really, I am listening for. Listen, I've been in therapy for a long time, so like I take the tools that my therapist uses on me and use them on other people. Like I listen really intently and try to get under the thing that they're talking about. Like if they're talking about this, there's something else going on under it, and I really want to understand that. I feel like now that I'm talking to you about it, I feel like that is kind of been the root of my success in certain areas, even in TV, because in TV you turn in a script and you have notes calls with executives, and the way you move forward in TV is being able to adjust to those notes, being able to understand it. And the thing about those notes is that like you have to know what's under the note. It's not about what they're writing or what they say to you. It's about something that they read or something that they saw made them feel something. And if you can figure out what that feeling is that they didn't like, then you can correct that the way you want to correct it and not necessarily not the prescriptive way that they may put in the notes. It's huge. If you can do that, you get a long career. And I think that I use that same skill. I think I got that skill from interviewing people and really trying to get under what it is that they're actually saying and get to like, what are they feeling? Like,
Yeah.
why did they come to that place?
It requires a whole bunch of creativity to kind of
Yes,
think in that way, but you're right, then you can sort of move forward in a way that is more amenable to what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I want to take a call from Charles on the West Side. Good morning, Charles. Go ahead.
Good Good morning, everybody. And Al, I've got a question I've been dying to ask you ever since the 50th anniversary of hip hop. But first, I think the cop, the deputy sheriff, I think he killed Billy Joe, the football player, with the shotgun, and on reveal, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is, I think, I was a kid back then, but in 1970, James Brown came out with a song called King Heroin with
Mm-hmm.
a lengthy soliloquy, if you will. And to me, I think that's the first rap song.
Hmm.
Could you agree with that?
I would say maybe. Like I think that I think I heard a song from the 40s, and these guys were rapping, or it wasn't the 40s, it was probably the 50s, and these guys were, it was on a TV show, and these guys were rapping, they were straight up rapping.
Mhm.
So I don't know, it could be. I'm not that type of hip hop historian. I mean, I know hip hop because I've lived it, but I don't know the specifics of it. And before you go, though, I just want to thank you for listening to Mississippi Goddamn, the Ballad of Billy Joe. That is my definitely, I don't know, that's my kind of my opus in journalism, and it means the world to me that you listen to it. And as far as your idea that the cop did it, I don't know. I wish I could tell you that I agree or disagree, but I do not know. As somebody that like researched it for a long time, there were days when I thought like he did, and there were days when I thought that he didn't. And but ultimately, like, my job in with that story was to make Billy Joe's family feel like they had been heard, and let Billy Joe got the investigation he deserved.
And that, for people who don't know, Mississippi Goddamn is a 7-part investigation that you did. It won a Murrow. It won a
Y-
bunch of awards.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And it was a real deep dive. It's kind of named after the Nina Simone song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, and I think that really kind of goes directly to what I was talking about earlier with context. Like, I think that the story very easily could have been like a true crimey story, but I didn't want to do that. Like, I wanted to take the death of this young black man who died under suspicious circumstances. And I wanted to connect the dots between how his family saw him dying, uh, a poor black family in rural Mississippi, versus how a lot of white people around them saw his death. And it's all about history and context, and the fact that his family has to live that history every day, and the white people around them not so much. And so the way they looked at his death was very different. And so, like, what I was trying to do is dive deep into that and bring kind of all of that together.
you say you didn't want it to come across as a true crime type podcast, and Lord knows there's a lot of those
Hmm.
right now. I mean, podcasts, television, everything. What is it about that true crime genre that troubles you or that you wanted to avoid?
Well, I mean, I'll say that, like, um, I don't judge people with my ruler, in the sense of like what you like. Look, I'm a comic nerd. I love comic books, and if people don't like comic books, I don't care. Like every time I travel, I go. The first thing I do is find a comic shop to see what they got. Um, if true crime is your thing, I am not judging anybody. Like, do your thing. It's what you love. One of my dearest friends, Bree Burge, loves true crime. Like, it's all good, right? For me and the story of Billy Joe Johnson, I felt like true crime would kind of sensationalize it, and make it feel like that wasn't the story I wanted to tell. If I wanted to do true crime, I could have, but, like, to me, it was much more interesting to talk about Billy Joe in context to everything that goes on around Mississippi and has gone on around Mississippi, and really largely the United States. And to me, that was much more impactful and interesting than doing it in a true crime lens.
I'm curious, do you have any thoughts about why it is that we are able to consume such enormous volumes of kind of terrible information, as it were, in that genre when People seem to have so little appetite for kind of real world bad news.
Yeah. Well, I think that like what true crime does is it turns it into Law and Order. And so if it's like Law and Order, it's not really real. Like it's real, but it's not really real. I mean, I sometimes watch Law and Order as comfort food because like what's gonna happen, right? And I also think that like when people listen and watch true crime, that it can um I don't know. It like brings you into somebody else's experience, but it also good true crime will grab you and drag you through, and like you have to know the answer. It's sort of like what I was talking about with storytelling, and like in TV you're writing for the break, in a comic book you're writing for the end. True crime uses those exact same tricks to draw you into the story. Um, and so, I mean, there's a lot of true crime that's done really well. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just, it's not what I wanted to do with Billy Joe Johnson.
Well, if you're just joining us, we are talking to award winning podcast host Al Letson about his new project, More to the Story with Al Letson. If you have questions for Al or you just want to say hi to this show's former host and let him know how much you miss him, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email us at First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, or you can reach out on social media. I do want to shift gears and talk for real a little bit more about this project that you're involved in, because I'm curious, you're doing deep dives with
Hmm.
interesting people. How do you select these people? And what is it? Are you going for some sort of variety in terms of their skill set, the topics that you're going to discuss?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is, and I don't know if the rest of the staff of the podcast would say this, but like the number one thing for me is my curiosity. And also like uh, I think that we are living in a world today that is more challenging than ever. I think this country is being challenged in ways that we don't even understand. And so like what I want to do is to go deeper into that and give people an understanding and give myself an understanding. There are things that like I don't understand and I want to talk to people about it. I want to I'm talking to an author, Mike Hixenbaum, who wrote a book called They Came for the Schools. And They Came for the Schools is really about how race has played out in school settings and what it has done to the culture. And I'm just curious about it. I read the book; it's great. And now I want to bring him on and really dive deep and really kind of get under those ideas that he puts forth in the book. I think that we live in a world now where we see the rise of technocrats. I want to understand that. I want to understand their philosophy and where they're coming from, and talk about it. And not only do I want to understand it, I want other people to understand it. I think that at the end of the day, journalism is an exercise in hope, even though we tell really hard stories. I mean, that's what I gravitate to as a journalist. Even though we tell really hard stories, the hope part of it is that, like, I am doing it in the hopes that out of the work that I do, a better world is made. That people will listen to the things to the interviews, to the people that I talk to, and it frames the world for them in a different way that makes them want to do something. I'm not an activist. My job is to arm activists with truth and information to move forward and make change in this world.
You talk about the issue of race in education, and obviously, just even in the last couple of days, big news on that issue with the new administration ordering schools to basically drop all of their DEI programming,
Yep.
public schools, colleges. And I'm curious how you are able in the podcast to sort of stay ahead of the news. It is seems that things are developing so quickly that trying to provide context is almost like a race against time.
Yeah, it is, but it's also like all of this is so predictable. It's so predictable. If you sat back and looked at like the moves that were being made, even in 2016, you could see us ending up where we are. Like, and if you were in 2016 and you were forecasting forward and seeing where you thought we would go, I think you could see a lot of what's happening. I think that for me, like I've seen a lot of it. The thing that I did not see in 2016 was a global pandemic. And I think that the global pandemic um, was like accelerant to the fire that we are now sitting in. With the little dog with the coffee saying it's fine, like the house is burning
Everything's
and
fine.
it's fine. But like that is exactly where we are. But I think that the pandemic was the accelerant that made that house go into flames. I think the house was always going to go into flames. I just think that it happened a lot quicker because what happened with COVID um, is that a lot of people, all of us, were in the house, and a lot of people became radicalized by things that they were seeing online in a way that they wouldn't have if they were out living their lives, in a way that they wouldn't have if they were human beings are social creatures. If you break us out of that social place and and all you have is like your computer and the internet is a place full of lies, half truths, and misinformation and disinformation, it is so easy for people to fall down those rabbit holes. And suddenly, here we are. And there are people who benefit from it specifically. And so, I mean, you can just, and I don't even have to name names. You can just think about like who's taken fact checking away from their social media platform. Why would you take fact checking away from a social media platform? Um, it's because like you're good with lies and misinformation and disinformation. Because as a famous character from a TV show once said, chaos is a ladder. And there is a ladder that is being climbed right now while all of us are stuck in the middle and trying to figure it all out.
Mm. Some of the people that you interview in this podcast are journalists.
Hmm.
They're pretty good at asking questions themselves.
Yeah.
Does that make it a more difficult thing for you to prepare for when you're going to be interviewing somebody that does that for a living?
Uh, yeah. I mean, I think that like on a whole, the people that I interview generally tend to be pretty guarded. And so like I just take it like, my job is I as a journalist, I don't like I think that the image that I have is that people have these walls around their castle. Um and I think a lot of journalists, a lot of my friends, like they take grappling hooks and they go over that wall and they try to get in. I don't do that. Like I'm a mole. Like I again, like this is a theme I think. I like to go under and get through and then surprise them and be like, "Oh, we're here." And so like yeah, I mean, journalists can be hard, but I think that most of the people that I talk to, and especially like in 2016, I was talking to a lot of people that will not talk to me now, because it's changed. Like in 2016, um, if you were, let's say, like for example, oh my goodness, I can't think of his name now. I'm seeing him now. He's got a big tattoo of Richard Nixon on his back.
Oh, Robert Roger
Roger Stone,
Stone.
Roger
We'll
Stone.
get it together.
Yeah. So Roger Stone, like, talked to me. He's not really talking to media outlets that he thinks are liberal these days. Um, and that was, man, Roger Stone was like the hardest interview. That was a hard interview. That was the hardest interview I've ever done because that man will lie like a rug. He has no problem lying to you. Like, and the thing is, like, when he's lying to you as a journalist, I couldn't fact check on the spot. So it's like, and I think that we are seeing this happen in real time now. Is that when the lies come out like a fire hose, you can't discern what is true and what's not true, and it confuses you. I remember at one point in the interview that I felt like I was like I am drowning, like I'm in the ocean and I am drowning, and I never had that experience before. Now I swam to the top and it was a good interview. I didn't let him beat me, but it was woo because he's willing to lie. But in 2016, he was also willing to talk to me, and I think that it's harder to get those. I would love to talk to Republican congressmen and ask them, like, because I think that politics is really about power and people trying to hold on to power at all costs. And I would just like to ask them, how's that working out for you? Because it feels to me like you don't have any power at all. It feels like you're trying to hold on to power by going forward with what your party is saying, and yet you lose power because they're taking it away from you. On the flip side, I'd love to talk to a Democratic congressman and ask them, like, what are you doing? I saw a recent press conference, and it was with a member of Congress, and that member of Congress was basically saying, throwing his hands up, saying, like, "Look, we don't own the House, we don't own the Senate, uh, we don't have anybody in the executive branch. It's their government. What can we do?"
Mhm.
And the only thing I could think of is Mitch McConnell would never have done that. Never. Mitch McConnell would have figured out a way. Mitch McConnell would have taken the Republican Party and been the opposition party every step of the way and done everything he could to disrupt the flow of
And he
business,
did.
and he did.
Yeah.
But the Democrats are just kind of like, hey, it's not. What can I do? And so, like, I want to talk to both of those, and hold them accountable to the American people on both sides of it.
It does seem a moment where a lot of people who oppose some of the policies of the new administration, that they're sort of each looking to one another, being like, well, when are you going to,
Right.
that lawmakers are looking to the public to be like, well, when is your outrage going to reach a point
Right.
that forces us to act or forces the
Right.
other side to react? And, people in the public are sort of waiting for their elected officials to act. And it does seem like there's sort of this moment where everybody's
Yep.
waiting. Um, we have a message from Walter Coker on Instagram. He says, Al Letson is a treasure. Great to hear his motivation, thoughts, and ideas on this country's current predicament. And we got a call from Joe in Riverside. Good morning, Joe. Go ahead.
Hey, Al, I just want to tell you that you are the best. You are my favorite podcaster, and your show Reveal is awesome. And I fell in love with you before I knew you were from Jacksonville, and I was like, wow, he's from Jacksonville. That's great. But anyway, I want to know what you think about how much Fox News has played into how the other side is feeling, especially when they were the only ones.
Well, I think that they're not the only ones, and I think that that's the key there, right? First of all, thank you for the love. I will make sure the check is in the mail. But thank you. I think that again, thinking about context and going back, you have to look at, like, I've been working with this theory, and this is not going to be popular for a lot of people, but I think things that we are seeing happening today were really set up during the Ronald Reagan administration. And in the Ronald Reagan administration, he passed several things that I think shifted the trajectory of politics in America. And one of those was getting rid of the fairness doctrine. And I think that when you got rid of the fairness doctrine, you get places like Fox, and on the flip side, you get places like MSNBC. And I think that